Article 7 of the Civil Code provides that laws are repealed only by subsequent ones, and their violation or non-observance shall not be excused by disuse or custom or practice to the contrary. When the courts declare a law to be inconsistent with the Constitution, the former shall be void and the latter shall govern. Administrative or executive acts, orders, and regulations shall be valid only when they are not contrary to the laws or the Constitution. This provision of the law appears in the Civil Code but it isn't discussed well in persons, kapatid. Instead, it is taken up in Statutory Construction, Constitutional Law 1 and 2, and again in public corporations. There are three important principles you will need to learn from this provision. 1. The prohibition on irrepealable laws. 2. Constitutional supremacy. 3. Effects of unconstitutionality. In this video, we will learn how laws are repealed, the effects of a law that has been repealed, and what happens if a law is declared unconstitutional. All of this and more coming right up. Hi, my name is Lex and welcome to Lex in Motion. In this channel, I'll be helping you build your competence, confidence, and capability in law school. Start today by hitting the subscribe button below. New episodes are posted every Friday. Article 7 of the Civil Code teaches us that laws are repealed only by subsequent ones. This makes sense, kapatid, at least in our universe because time moves forward. Ang isang batas ay maaaring mapawalan ng bisa sa pamamagitan ng mga sumusunod pang mga batas. This is what repeal means. However, it is wrong that a law loses its power only through a repeal. Ang isang batas ay maaaring mapawalan din ng bisa kung ito ay aamyendahan, papalitan o babaguhin in such a way that it loses all of its effects. A law can also lose its effects when it expires. Mainit na mainit ngayon ang issue ng expiration ng batas, kapatid, pero isa ito sa mga paraan kung paano napapawalan ng bisa ang isang batas. Halimbawa, Republic Act No. 10155 is the General Appropriations Act of 2015. Ang General Appropriations Act or GAA ay isang batas kung saan isinasaad ang magiging budget ng iba't ibang mga tanggapan at ahensya ng ating pamahalaan. Yan ang budget ng gobyerno, kapatid. Ang mga GAA ay taon-taong ipinapasa unless hindi nagkakasundo, in which case, copy-paste na lang tayo from the previous year. Ang GAA ay may effectivity ng 1 year. Pagtapos nito, wala nang bisa ang batas. When the law tells us that laws are repealed only by subsequent ones, it also tells us, by necessary implication, that there is a prohibition on irrepealable laws. Ibig sabihin, kapatid, bawal na sabihin ng isang batas o isang ordinansa na ito ay hindi pwedeng amyendahan, palitan, baguhin o alisin. Patuloy na nagbabago ang ating mundo at ang mga batas noon ay maaaring hindi na akma o hindi na nakakatulong sa panahon ngayon. If our Constitution itself provides 4 ways for how changes or amendments to it can be made, then Congress, whose power comes from the Constitution, cannot make a law that will stand forever. A repeal of a law takes on 2 forms. The first is an express repeal, where a new law specifically mentions another law and repeals it. You can usually identify an express repeal by the title of the law. For example, Republic Act 10963 or the Train Law has a very long title and I'll show that on the screen right now. What I want to highlight here is that sections 35, 62, and 89 of the National Internal Revenue Code are specifically mentioned. The express repeal of these provisions are found under section 86 of the Train Law, which specifically repeals them. The second form of a repeal is the implied repeal. As a general rule, an implied repeal is not favored. Hindi kasi ito malinaw, hindi ito specific at walang label. Kagaya ng nakaka-chat mo ngayong mga panahon ng ECQ. Wala kayong label at kung sakaling mag-GCQ na tayo next week, huwag kang maghahabol, kapatid, kung hindi ka na pinapansin kasi nga walang label. There is an implied repeal when the following requisites are present. 1. There is an old law and a new law. 2. Both laws cover the same subject matter. 3. The new law is repugnant or incompatible with the old law. Halimbawa, kunwari kapatid ay meron tayong batas na ipinagbabawal ang pagsuot ng face mask, helmet, kopya at sunglasses sa lahat ng mga bangko at mga tanggapan ng pamahalaan for security reasons. Ngayon, nagpasa naman ng batas ang Kongreso na bawal papasukin ng walang face mask sa lahat ng business establishments kasama ang mga bangko at maging mga ahensya ng pamahalaan. In this scenario, we have two laws. There is an old law which helps banks identify the faces of people kung sakaling may holdupper. It prohibits the wearing of face masks. The new law, on the other hand, requires that everyone should wear a face mask, even when they're entering banks and government agencies. Both laws cover the same subject matter, the wearing of masks inside banks. However, these laws are incompatible with each other. Which one should we follow? In statutory construction, there is a rule that in case there is conflict between the provisions of an old law and the new law, it is the new law that should govern. Bakit mananaig ang mas bagong batas? The new law will prevail because it is the newer, more updated, and more recent reflection of the intentions of the lawmaker. However, I would like to add that before you apply this law, siguraduhin muna natin na may conflict. Pwede bang mag-apply ang parehong batas? Pwede ba silang mapatupad ng sabay? Can they be reconciled? Can they coexist? The best way to do that is to read through the end of the law. The last 3 or 4 sections of the law are usually the repealing clause, the separability clause, and the effectivity clause. The effectivity clause is something we have discussed before. In case you missed it, I'll be leaving a link to that in the description down below. The repealing clause is that part of the law that states all laws, decrees, rules, and regulations inconsistent with the provisions of this act are hereby repealed or amended accordingly. When this statement appears and the new law is in conflict with another law, this is an instance of an implied repeal of the older law. Now that we know the kinds of repeals, let me turn your attention, kapatid, on how these concepts are asked in law school. Ang pinaka-common na tanong sa repeal ay ang effects ng revival. This part is important and I need you to write this down. Section 21, Chapter 5 of Book 1 of the Administrative Code of 1987 provides that when a law which expressly repeals a prior law itself repealed, the law first repealed shall not be thereby revived unless expressly so provided. Section 22 also provides that when a law which impliedly repeals a prior law is itself repealed, the prior law shall thereby be revived unless the repealing law provides otherwise. The rules on revival can be confusing and let me tell you, kapatid, magulo rin para sa akin yan over 10 years ago. Pero hayaan mong pasimplihin natin yan. Let's make a table. We have Rule X that was expressly repealed by Rule Y. Rule Z later on repeals Rule Y. Then, Rule X is not revived except when Rule Z specifically revives Rule X. Hindi importante dito, kapatid, kung paano nag-repeal si Rule Z. Ang titignan lang ay kung express ang ginawang repeal ng pangalawang rule sa unang rule. Next na titignan ay kung may provision for revival. May revival lang kung sinabi ng batas na may revival. Next, Rule A was impliedly repealed by Rule B. Later on, Rule B was repealed by Rule C, applying Section 22. Then, the rule is that there is automatic revival. The exception is when Rule C specifically provides that Rule A shall not be revived. Hindi rin material dito kung ang repeal ng Rule B by Rule C is express or implied. Article 7 of the Civil Code also teaches us that the violation or non-observance of laws is never justified even when others do not obey the law. When our customs tell us otherwise or there is practice to the contrary. Maano bang magpa-birthday party kasi tayo kahit pa walang lumpiang Shanghai? When the law prohibits parties, then we should not party even when others do so. Kung ikaw, kapatid, ay na-late sa klase at nag-beat ka ng red light, hindi mo pwedeng sabihin sa traffic enforcer na bakit po ako yung inhuli nyo, bakit hindi nyo hinuli yung nauna sa akin. Number 1, dahil nauna nga siya sa'yo at maaaring nakadaan na siya. At pangalawa, dahil sa Article 7. Just because others are disobeying the law does not mean you can disobey the law. Customs, we will discuss later when we get to Article 11. The second paragraph of Article 7 speaks about constitutional supremacy. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Entire books are written about it. All laws, administrative or executive acts, orders, and regulations must conform with the Constitution. If there is conflict between the law or executive act and the Constitution, then the Constitution always prevails. This is known as the principle of constitutional supremacy. At its essence, the Constitution is the will of the people. It begins with the phrase, "We, the sovereign Filipino people, atin ang Constitution." It does not expire. When Congress passes a law, they do so by the strength and power we give to them. And that is given to them when we vote for them in office. If we have bad laws, it is to a certain extent our fault because we keep on giving our power, the power of the ballot, our votes, to people who don't deserve it, to people who can't take care of our interests, the interests of our children, and the interests of our country. This power and the host of other powers are all contained in the Constitution. Because the Constitution is the direct expression of the will of the Filipino people, then all other laws that run counter to or oppose the Constitution are void. The law that contradicts the Constitution is unconstitutional. In Pimentel versus Legal Education Board, the Supreme Court ruled that the practice of requiring all law students to pass the PhilSat before they are admitted to law school is unconstitutional. This is an important case in constitutional law, and I will encourage you to read it now. I will leave a link to that in the description down below. What is an unconstitutional law? What is the effect of unconstitutionality? Yan ang unang tinanong sa akin sa aking kauna-unahang recitation sa law school. An unconstitutional act, ma'am, is not a law. It confers no rights. It imposes no duties. It affords no protection. It creates no office. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though it had never been passed. This was the ruling of the Supreme Court in the case of Chavez versus Judicial and Bar Council. However, this is only a general rule. There is one recognized exception to this general rule, and that is the doctrine of operative fact. Because an unconstitutional law is not a law, it is treated as if it were never passed. However, under the doctrine of operative fact, the rights of parties who relied on the law prior to its unconstitutionality are still valid. The past cannot always be erased by a new judicial declaration. Let me make this clear, kapatid. For the exception to apply, the rights and the action must be based on equity and fair play. Kung umasa ka sa isang batas at ang batas na iyon ay unconstitutional pala, maaari pa ring valid ang rights mo under the unconstitutional law provided the rights are based on equity and fair play. When a law is declared unconstitutional, then it can be unconstitutional in part or in full. Full, madali lang yan. Malinaw naman sa mga decisions ng Supreme Court at sinasabi nila na void ang kabuuan. Kung sinabi nila na specific provisions lang, then it is partial unconstitutionality. The last parts of most pieces of legislation contain a separability clause. It is in effect a disclaimer that if one of the parts of the law is declared unconstitutional, then the remaining parts, if they still make sense, should be upheld. To summarize tonight's discussion, number 1, laws are repealed by subsequent ones. Congress cannot make a law that can never be repealed. 2, when an express repeal is repealed, there is no revival, except when the repealing law provides. 3. When an implied repeal is repealed, there is automatic revival, except when the repealing law provides otherwise. 4. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, period. 5. An unconstitutional law is a void law, and the exception is the doctrine of operative fact. I think we can stop here, kapatid. I strongly advise that you read the cases I mentioned before you take the quiz. Please do not mention the questions in the comments below para naman hindi ma-spoil yung quiz sa mga manonood pa lang. If you would like to continue with this series, just type yes in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Like and share this video for good law school karma, and I will see you next Friday.